Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vice President of Production Marketing Symantec, John McGee.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to our session on the last mile. So what we're going to do today is talk about virtualizing the mission-critical, business-critical, Tier 1 applications that power your business. So when we think about the challenges in virtualizing business-critical applications, there's a few things that come to the fore. And when you think about where most of the organizations are with virtualization today, it's pretty common now to see virtualization rates of 50%, 60% even of the application workloads that have been virtualized already. So most of the organizations I talk to, probably most of you, are well on your way to virtualizing your infrastructure and getting the benefits of that, right? But when it comes to the cycle of deployment, it's pretty common to start with pilot projects and move into test dev, move into things like print, file, web, and then there's tier 2 applications, and getting the benefits of virtualization in that cycle of adoption as the technology matures, as your own organization matures, and the ability to manage those environments. But for the most part, the Tier 1 business-critical applications still haven't been virtualized, and that's what we mean by going the last mile. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is the problem? What's the challenge that's been holding us as an industry back from really going that last mile and getting the benefits of virtualization on those business-critical applications? So it's not that the benefits don't apply in that environment. Cost savings, server consolidation, more agility in terms of being able to move workloads around dynamically, being able to do resource scheduling, get the benefits of that. All of that applies even more so in the environments that are running the applications that power your business. But there's been some challenges. So one of the things that comes up over and over again is concerns around service levels, performance, availability, security, data protection, the things that really aren't optional when you're talking about this category of applications. Organizational inertia is sometimes part of it. The teams that run things like email, ERP, CRM, these kinds of Tier 1 applications are often different than the teams that are setting up those initial VMware deployments and starting to virtualize other parts of the infrastructure. And then finally, technical limitations. If we're honest about it, there's been a maturation process of this technology, and there's been some things that have held us back from making it easy to manage in these environments. So what we want to do today is make the point that the time is now. And now the technology has matured. It's possible to meet the service level challenges around this category of business-critical applications and do it in a way that's simpler and easier to manage, right? And that's the key. So for the rest of this time, we're going to focus on some of these big areas, some of these big challenge areas, and talk about some of the ways that through new tools, new technologies, it's gotten easier than ever before to go that last mile and to virtualize those business-critical applications, right? All right. So let's start with one of the first big areas that comes up over and over again, which is high availability. So challenges around high availability are often cited as one of the biggest concerns when people think about virtualizing their business-critical applications. In fact, an IDC survey found that high availability was the most often cited concern around managing virtual environments. So when you think about that, existing tools get us part of the way there, right? We've got the great foundation that VMware HA itself gives you in the VMware environment. So you've got the ability, if a physical server goes down, if an OS incident occurs, to elegantly fail that over, keep up and running, keep a new virtual machine going. The challenge is that when you're talking about these business-critical applications, they're typically multi-tier, complex dependency chains of a whole bunch of different processes. And a lot of times when they go down, it isn't because of a physical server failure. It's because one of those individual processes somewhere in that complex dependency chain, think about Exchange, think about SAP, think about Oracle applications, think about complex transactional web applications. These kinds of applications, there's a whole bunch of processes that could go out for a whole bunch of reasons that have nothing to do with physical and OS failures, right? So the challenge in that scenario is having that visibility and the ability to control what's going on in those complex application environments. So what are people doing? People have been out there doing this on their own, more or less. So some people are writing scripts. They're going in and trying to write scripts inside the guests that determine that there's been a failure and then notify someone to do some kind of manual restart. Painful, error-prone, lots of human involvement. Other people are trying to do things like run Microsoft Cluster Server inside a virtual environment, right? It's a clustering solution. So for HA, challenge there is once you get that up and running, which is no small feat, now you can't do things like take advantage of vMotion, take advantage of DSR. You've essentially negated all your virtualization benefits by locking yourself into this rigid environment using yesterday's technology to achieve high availability in a virtual environment. So to address this problem, there's been a number of advances, and one of the things that we are very excited about is to be announcing today Semantic Application HA for VMware. So this is a new product, brand new, being unveiled at the show this week, and it's integrated right into vCenter. It's the result of a lot of collaboration between VMware and Semantic engineering teams, and it provides that application-level visibility and control. So we're very excited about this new announcement, and to help me tell you more about it, I'd like to invite two very special guests up. First, from VMware, please welcome Raghu Raghuram. Raghu is the Senior Vice President from VMware, responsible for the data center and desktop business units.
Hello, John.
And Anil Chakravarti. Anil is the Senior Vice President from Semantic, responsible for the storage and availability management group. Anil, welcome. All right, thanks, guys. So, Raghu, let's start with you. Can you tell us about some of the challenges that you saw in the virtual environments that you see every day around HA and some of the things that led you to work with Semantic on this?
Yeah, definitely. Like you pointed out, customers are on a journey with respect to how they virtualize their data center. Starts with the simpler dev test, goes into applications, IT controls, and then the line of business applications, followed by the mission-critical applications, followed by eventually setting up of a private cloud. And most of our customers, we have over 190,000 customers, and we try to do fairly deep research into where they are in the stage and what they're doing. Most of the customers that have been with VMware for any length of time are squarely the middle stage, which is virtualizing the business-critical applications. Applications like Oracle databases, SQL Server databases, Exchange, SharePoint, et cetera, and while our fundamental platform gives them a great level of resiliency, makes it possible for them to do things like SRM or disaster recovery in a much more simpler and cost-efficient manner, we at a platform level do not have visibility into the application, or like you said, into the processes that constitute the application. So while we can do a great job of protecting the environment, the application environment from infrastructure failures, we can't do anything about anything that happens at the OS and above. And that's an outage that our customers have pointed out to us. And so we are very excited to be working with Symantec and Symantec's engineers to find a solution to that problem.
Great. Can you say a little about that collaboration that's gone on between the respective engineering teams?
Yes. This is something that has been gone on for quite a bit of time, over a year, where there were two areas of collaboration. One, obviously, is to figure out the high availability part of the problem, and second, equally important, is how do you manage the HA environment. As most of the people in the audience very well know, HA environments can be very complex to set up and manage, Microsoft Cluster Server being an example, right? And the third aspect of it is how do you build it in such a way that the solution is compatible with everything else that you get in a VMware environment. And that's been the core of the engineering effort in the last several months.
Yep, great. All right, and Anil, I know that integration into vCenter was one of the keys here, which obviously requires a lot of collaboration. How did that go from Symantec's perspective?
From our perspective, it has worked really well, and Raghu and I have had regular reviews over the last year or so, as he said, when we were collaborating. We worked with them to define an API, the app monitoring API, which is what we use for the heartbeat from us to VMware HA. We also worked closely with them to figure out where the partition of duties was, what we would do versus what VMware would do, so it's really clear. Yeah. And the other big thing was we got a lot of help from VMware to design it in such a way that it fits into the typical VMware administrator's operational model. So, how to architect it into vCenter so that they can do all of it without using any other set of tools. So it can be done exactly with the tools that they're already familiar with. So those were the big areas we collaborated on.
Great. All right. Well, thanks very much, Raghu. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm glad you came by, and we'll let Anil tell us more about Semantic HA.
Thank you, Raghu. Really appreciate it.
Okay. All right, Anil, go ahead and
just to add a little bit to what you already presented. It's a tool that provides application-level visibility and control. It's built on the Veritas Cluster Server technology. I think many of you are familiar with Veritas Cluster Server. It has been the industry standard for high availability for 15 years now if you're running business-critical, mission-critical applications in physical environments. And what we've worked very closely with VMware on is to bring that same technology into virtual environments so that you have the same level of high availability in virtual environments. We worked really closely with VMware. It's very easy to install and configure. It has deep discovery, auto-configuration capabilities so that you can install it very easily. I'll show you in the demo how it fits into the current operational model within VMware so that you can, a VMware administrator, we kind of break the silo, if you will, between the infrastructure, VMware administrators, and the system administrators who are responsible for HA through the operational model. In terms of the applications that we support, for Veritas Cluster Server, we've had a rich history of doing that. We have over 100+ agents. We have an agent framework, so you can actually customize it for your own applications. What we've done is taken the most common applications working closely with VMware, like SAP, Oracle, SQL Server, Exchange, IIS, WebLogic, and figured out how to take these agents and run them within the VMware environment so that you get the full richness. So for each of these applications, our agents are aware of the structure of the applications, the typical failure conditions, and what happens and how they fail, and what they fail due to, whether it's network issues, storage issues, database issues, and so on. And we're bringing that rich array of application-level visibility into the agents that are running with Semantic Application HA. In terms of what it does, let me just give you a quick overview, and then we can dive into the demo. The primary thing that it does, first of all, is, of course, to monitor the application status. We monitor the application status for potential failure conditions. We are constantly in heartbeat with VMware HA through this app monitoring API that I mentioned. Then if we do notice a failure, we restart the app. And if the restarting the app works, that's great. If restarting the app doesn't work, depending on the policy that's been set, after a certain number of restarts, we invoke VMware HA to actually restart the VM. And if necessary, then if that doesn't work, then to go with the policy that customers have set to maybe use vMotion and so on. So that's the picture of what the app does. Maybe I can go ahead and give a
let's
demo.
take a look.
Okay, is it up there? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so this is the familiar vSphere client login screen. Let me log in there. What you see up there is the standard vCenter console. What we have in this demo are two applications that are running in, an Oracle and a SQL Server demo. I will dive into the SQL Server one. What you see on the tabs, to your far right, you see a tab called Application HA. So this is integrated, as I mentioned, into vCenter. That's the primary tab that lets you take the actions that Application HA is doing, and it's fully integrated into vCenter. So with that, let me go into the SQL demo. So if I go to SQL demo and open up that Application HA tab, what you see is a SQL Server 2008 application running. The status is online. The auto refresh frequency has been set to a minute. just to look a little bit deeper into what it has in that SQL Server instance. There's actually 2 instances running. So we are, for example, aware of the structure of SQL Server. We built our first SQL Server agent almost 10 years ago for Veritas Cluster Server, and we're bringing that knowledge into this agent. So there's 2 instances running, SQL Server 1 and SQL Server 2. Each of those has 2 supporting services, an MS OLAP service and a SQL agent service. And the storage mounts are accessible for each one of them. So it's online and running normally. In terms of the actions that we can take, so application monitoring has already been configured. You can unconfigure or stop the application monitoring at any point. The application heartbeat, which is the connection between us, the Semantic Application HA, and VMware HA, that is running as well. For certain maintenance reasons, you can disable it if you want to. The application is running. You can start and stop the applications. And this status of what it does is actually shown in the vCenter. So I don't show you the GUI right here, but as Raghu was pointing out, you can now, using this product, you can double-click all the way from, the data center to the cluster to the specific machine to the VM, and then you double-click on that, and it'll show you the actual applications that are running. So you can actually start and stop from that point as well. So it gives you full visibility into the application at the VM level. And finally, you can enter maintenance mode. For example, if you want to do patching on the applications and so on. Now, we'll just show you an example of moving into the SQL Server Configuration Manager to show you that the state that the application HA is tracking is the same as what you see in the SQL Server Configuration Manager. Let me go in there. And if you see the SQL Server Configuration Manager, it shows you that the 2 instances are there, the SQL Server 1 and 2, and those are running as well. Now, you don't obviously need to use the SQL Server Configuration Manager for using any of application HA. We're just using this as an example to show that the 2 applications are always, or rather the status of the application is in sync at all times between what you see in the application itself and what you see in Semantic Application HA. Now, going back to vCenter, let me show you a couple of different actions that you can take. First of all, let's go ahead and stop this application. Again, you stop the application within Semantic Application HA. Status shows as offline. Double checking. Let's go into the SQL Server Configuration Manager one more time. And you'll see that it shows the status of the 2 instances as having been stopped here. Now, let me show you what happens when you induce a failure in this particular case. So I'm going to go back to Semantic Application HA, restart the application. And then now it's back online. Let me go back now to the SQL Server Configuration Manager. And what I'm going to do is stop one of the SQL Server instances. So go up there and stop the SQL Server instance. Yes. And so it stops the SQL Server service. And so if we go back in and refresh the vCenter, what has really happened there is because you had set the application for automatic restart, when we go back there, we see it as online. Because by the time I actually go back to vCenter, it has updated the status and shows it as online. Now, for the purpose of this demo, what we did was to set the restart limit at 2, which basically said if it fails a second time, don't restart. Invoke VMware HA. So I'm back into SQL Server Configuration Manager. I'm going to stop this application a second time. Okay, stop it a second time. And this time when I go back to the vCenter, what it shows me is that the status of the application is faulted, and in the description, it shows that it's unable to start the Microsoft SQL Server instance. And so now, at this point, using this app monitoring API, we invoke the VMware HA, and the entire VM is restarted. So I'll just show you a couple of screens to show that it gets restarted. And then based on that, apply the settings. And then when we restart it, it comes back to the status at which we started it, at which we started the demo. So both applications, both instances of SQL Server are back online.
Great. Awesome.
So just to wrap up a little bit, some of the key things, as you pointed out, One, it's completely integrated with vCenter.
Yeah.
You don't need to use any other set of tools. We have the same kind of rich understanding of multiple applications, and as I mentioned, we're starting with an initial set of applications, working very closely with VMware to make it available.
Yep, great. And when is it actually available?
It's available at the end of September. It's
right,
GAing on September 30th.
And how do people buy it?
It's through Symantec or any of Symantec's partners.
Okay, great. All right, thanks very much, Anil.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, major step forward in these business critical applications, HA solution, all inside vCenter, gives you complete visibility. All right, so now you can close that gap between the application owners and the people that are managing the infrastructure and the environment. Well, so they have the same information, the same visibility about the status of an application. So you're not waiting for end users to start screaming to come back and figure out what the problem is. So complete visibility and control right from within vCenter. All right, so we crossed off one of the big challenges around virtualizing business-critical applications, which is high availability. So now let's talk about another big area that comes up a lot when people are thinking about how they're going to tackle virtualizing these Tier 1 applications, which is backup and restore, really getting the data protection model right in these virtual environments. So Symantec is the market leader in backup products like NetBackup and Backup Exec. I talk to a lot of our customers about their virtualization projects, and it's not uncommon to have a conversation with an admin or IT manager where they're a little sheepish about their backup processes around the latest and greatest virtual deployments that they just did. So again, so much energy and excitement going into those initial deployments. Backup processes sometimes take a back seat. And when you're just talking about less critical applications, that's not a problem. But when you start talking about business critical Tier 1 applications, obviously that's a big problem. So business critical apps means by default business critical data. So data protection processes have to be bulletproof, just as they are in the physical server environments that we're operating today. All right? So virtualization introduces some new twists around backup, and we've addressed those in previous releases. Backup is important, but so is restore, right? So being able to recover in line with your commitments around recovery time objectives, being able to recover granular files, documents, folders, other objects when that's required, and doing all of this without impacting performance. And that's a biggie when you're thinking about these Tier 1 applications. So there's a number of things that we've done, working, again, closely with VMware to help optimize backups for these virtualized environments. So one of the big things that happened recently was VMware itself evolved from the VCB APIs to the backup tools like Symantec's NetBackup to the VADP API or the vStore APIs for data protection. This was a big deal, a huge advance in terms of being able to let us leverage our most sophisticated technologies in a virtual environment. So one of the things that meant is that now we were able to do incremental backups, whereas before we couldn't do that. So right off the bat, you can slash backup times by half or better. Right? So that was a big deal, being able to do incremental backups by just tracking the changed blocks in a VMDK and then just doing the incremental backup on those. Less performance hit on the environment and much faster performance. We've also been able to introduce deduplication into these environments, and your average VMDKs have a lot of deduplication potential. Right? So we're seeing rates of 50 to 90% deduplication rates around these VMDKs, which, when server sprawl or VM sprawl starts leading to a lot of VMDKs, a lot of images, that can have a big impact on overall storage growth and overall storage management, right? So being able to get faster backup times and much reduced data volumes is a huge win. So again, as the technologies have matured, as we've been able to take advantage of those new APIs and bring to bear the sophisticated technologies that we have around these environments, you benefit by being able to take those tools into your most mission-critical environments and make sure that you've got your data protected as well as your applications. Right? All right, so high availability, protecting the applications, data protection, protecting the data. Now let's talk about another area that has to be considered when you're talking about this category of applications, which is around security. So Semantic operates the largest network of security monitoring. So we call it our global intelligence network. We've got over 140 million nodes sensing what's going on around the world in the threat landscape. We've got over 2.5 million decoys in our probe networks. We see 30% of the world's email every day. So we have a very good handle on the threat landscape. And there's two big things that we see happening. One is it's a lot more dynamic than ever before, changes all the time. And things like machine-generated malware variants mean that there's more types of malware out there than ever before. But the second factor, probably even a bigger concern when you're thinking about these kinds of business-critical applications that manage people's money, people's transactions, people's data, is that there's a lot more quieter target attacks. And they're not trying to bring down systems. They're trying to steal information. They're trying to steal money. Right? So that's been a trend that we've been observing for a while now. And when you think about dynamic data centers, highly virtualized, essentially you're introducing new surface areas for attack. Right? So the more motion, the more mobility, the more dynamic nature of these environments, the more you have to think about hardening systems, think about zones of security levels, and think about how that dynamic aspect of virtualization impacts your existing security processes in those environments. So in terms of what's doable, we've been optimizing our security products, again, for the VMware environment, so that you can take advantage of the full set of capabilities that Semantic has in these virtual environments. Right? And it's critical to be able to have visibility and control across both your physical server environments as well as your virtual environments. So being able to monitor, for example, what's going on not just in your physical servers, not just in your virtual servers, but across your entire environment is a big help. So with solutions like Semantic Critical System Protection, we're able to do hardening of the server environments that can do intrusion prevention, monitoring across both your host and guest VMs. Right? And Critical System Protection provides a number of layered defense mechanisms around your server environment, and it comes with out-of-the-box policies that enforce VMware's hardening guidelines, as well as what Semantic understands about the various attack vectors and the vulnerabilities that they present. Right? So out-of-the-box policies so you can set up server hardening in these virtual environments to make it much more manageable to secure and get the benefits of virtualization in these more dynamic environments. So other things we've done working closely with VMware, again, are things like being able to do resource leveling so that things like scans, when we need to do a scan of an environment, if there's 10 VMs running on a single physical server, we're able to rationalize that so they're not all doing scans, they're not all doing virus updates at the same time. So that resource utilization leveling kicks in, and we're able to make sure that we're looking at things like CPU utilization and tuning the security operations so they don't negatively impact the performance of the virtual environments. So across the board, our security, compliance, and other solutions have been tested and optimized for the VMware environment, and we're continuing to work closely with them on the next generation of security solutions that's coming out later. All right, so we knocked off high availability, data protection, security. There's one more important area when you're thinking about these business-critical applications, and that's storage. All right, so storage is a challenge in a virtual environment for a number of reasons. Right? Cost and performance are two of the biggest. So when you're thinking about any virtual environment, but in particular these business critical applications that we're talking about, storage costs have to be a concern. So when you think about the average virtualization project, Tech Alpha issued a report not too long ago that said that storage was the largest cost component of a virtualization project. 40%, more than the servers, more than the software, more than any other part of a virtualization project. And a lot of people are finding that if they don't watch out, storage costs can eat into the ROI that they're getting from their server consolidation efforts that virtualization is driving. So this is a big deal for people, right? Making sure that you can take advantage of virtualization, but don't blow the budget on storage. So why is that hard? Well, you guys know storage tends to proliferate along with VM. So as you get this VM sprawl situation happening, you also tend to have the complexities of managing storage in those environments. VM decays themselves are large files. If you're dealing with a lot of boot images, if you're dealing with a lot of different VMs, that right there is a lot of additional storage to manage. If you're taking advantage of virtual desktops, that can be a huge explosion in the number of VMs that you're having to manage, provision, and store. Right? So there's a whole bunch of challenges that arise just in the volume of storage. Then there's also the complexity. Right? So as you're taking advantage of the dynamic nature of virtualization, as you're moving workloads from one VM to another, as you're taking advantage of being able to spin up applications and then shut them down when they're not needed because you're reallocating resources. Every time you're doing that, there's also storage complexities underneath that to map those applications, map those VMs to their underlying storage, to allocate and deallocate as needed. So the management complexity can go up considerably. And then the third big challenge is that these two combined can mean that performance can suffer at scale. So when you're really trying to do the bigger, hairier challenges, think those business critical applications, that's where you can get into I/O bottlenecks and other situations that can really slow you down in those environments. So what are we doing about that? So the other big news that we're unveiling this week at the show is a new product called Semantic Virtual Store. Right? So what Virtual Store is a software-based clustered NAS solution. Right? So it's software-based, and it provides clustered NAS capabilities, centrally managed through vCenter, just like Application HA. So it's right in your vCenter console. Gives you the ability to manage storage from that same vCenter environment. It lets you scale your servers and your storage independently. It's optimized to handle VMware boot images, and I'll talk about some of the challenges with that, as well as very fast provisioning, hundreds of thousands of VMs provisioned in just minutes. Right? And this is a semantic storage solution, so it works with whatever storage hardware you want to use it with. Right? So you can use it with EMC, HP, IBM, NetApp, Hitachi, 3PAR. Anyone's storage out there pretty much will work with Semantic Virtual Store under VMware. Right? So there's a couple important things around the economics of this that we think are going to be disruptive to the NAS market underneath VMware in particular. So think about the way you typically buy NAS today from your favorite storage hardware vendors, right? So there's a NAS controller between your ESX servers and your actual storage, right? So they want to sell you the controllers, and typically those controllers account for 70% of the total cost of the storage, more than the actual disk, right? So the controllers themselves are an expensive chunk of the overall environment. Second, the controllers are a bottleneck, and they typically max out at 250 virtual servers or 1,000 virtual desktops, right? So typically, they max out before the actual filer capacity is maxed out. So this controller becomes the bottleneck to your environment. And they're not cheap. Typical pricing around $50K a pop, right? And when you max out, when you hit the limits, You need to add more controllers. Even if you still have enough disk, you got to go buy more controllers. Oh, and guess what? A lot of them only sell them to you 2 at a time. You might only need 1, but they want to sell you 2. Why? Well, it doesn't make any sense, right? That the model is skewed toward the storage hardware vendor's benefit, right? So what we're talking about here is a software NAS solution that you can run on a Linux box on the servers, scales linearly, so you don't get the problem of maxing out that control point, and you can add 5 to 7K Linux boxes instead of 50K controllers. And remember, it's a semantic solution, so you don't have to buy just one vendor's hardware. You can use whatever hardware you want underneath there, right? Use NetApp, use IBM, use EMC, Hitachi, whatever you want. Mix and match. Use JBOD if that makes sense for your environment, right? So you are in control. You get the cost benefits. You get the flexibility by deploying intelligent software that can help you scale your environment and do it cost effectively, right? So majorly disruptive, we think, to the way the typical NAS business under VMware works today. All right, a couple other really cool things about Semantic Virtual Store that I want to share with you. So we talked about being able to scale servers and storage independently, scale by adding cheap Linux servers instead of big expensive controllers, use any disk you want, and in these virtual desktop deployments, you can really get the cost down per virtual desktop to under $100 per VDI, right? That's a big deal and a critical evaluation point for your ROI calculations around these types of deployments. A couple other important things. Provisioning VMs. There's a feature in Virtual Store called FileSnap that lets you provision very rapidly hundreds, thousands of virtual machines. So this is important for high-volume server environments, particularly important for these virtual desktop environments where you might have thousands of users to support, and you've got to be able to provision, patch, update, put out new versions of these desktops, essentially, very rapidly. Again, all from within vCenter, right? The next big issue is around what's sometimes called the VDI boot storm in these virtual desktop environments. You've got a whole bunch of users come in, they all sign in, log in at the same time, and it's all centralized now, so you've got to boot all these virtual images. It can be a real performance bottleneck with conventional NAS storage solutions, right? So what we've done is introduced unique caching technology so that we can rapidly boot hundreds, thousands of these virtual machine images right out of Virtual Store so that you can weather that boot storm problem that's so common in these environments, right? So major advance in the ability to manage storage cost effectively in these high-scale, high-volume, business-critical application environments, taking advantage of everything that VMware has to offer, managing it from within vCenter, and being able to get the economics on your side, not on the side of the storage hardware vendor. All right, so we've talked about high availability, we've talked about data protection, we've talked about security, and we've talked about storage. Critical service level issues that in many ways have been obstacles to organizations taking that step down the last mile to virtualizing the business critical applications that run their business. So the time is now. Technologies have matured. The innovation has happened. It's easier than ever to manage, easier than ever to deploy. And you've got integrated solutions now so that you can work within that VMware environment, but take advantage of advanced technologies from people like us. Right? So, with that, I'll close out and I'll say there's 2 more semantic sessions remaining if you haven't had a chance to learn more about these. First off, this afternoon at 4:30, there's a drill down on HA, so Semantic HA, the high availability solution that we were talking about, at 4:30, and then a solution on data protection backup for VMware tomorrow at 10:30 in the morning. So with that, I'll close out, and we'll be around for questions if you have any. Thank you very much.